And we're back. This is the second part of your review video for Unit 1-2, and we're going to run through these saints real quick, and then we're going to talk about the long essay. So these are the saints you'll need to know for the test. You'll need to pick one of them to talk about in more detail. I would look into your textbook as a first resource, and also your notes, and you can also use the internet. But the textbook's the first place I would try. So Benedict and Scholastica are known as the founders of Western monasticism. They were, I don't know, of course they weren't identical twins, but they were twins, brother and sister. Benedict is probably the more famous. He wrote the Rule, which is kind of like a constitution for a monastery of how to live in a monastery, and it became the basis for most monasteries and orders even till today. Catherine of Siena is the one who convinced the Pope to return to Rome from Avignon. Thomas Aquinas is the most famous medieval theologian. We'll talk about him a lot when we get to the sacraments in the third quarter. Francis of Assisi founded the Franciscans. He served the poor, lived very simply. He left behind a fairly decently well-off middle-class family to serve the poor. He was a noblewoman in the town named Clare abandoned her rich life and followed Francis and founded the Poor Clares, who are basically the female versions of the Franciscans. The Dominicans were the other famous mendicant order founded by St. Dominic Guzman, who was he founded his order to preach against heresy, specifically the Albigensians, and to spread the gospel. They're known as the Order of Preachers. The Franciscans are known as the Order of Friars Minor, meaning the little brothers. Leo the Great was a very powerful Dark Ages pope, and when Rome fell apart, he was the pope right at the end when Rome was falling apart, so he kind of helped hold things together. He took on a political role. He was kind of the first pope to do that, and at the Council of Chalcedon, he wrote this brilliant tome which helped convince everybody and won the day away from monophysitism. Gregory the Great was also a very holy pope during the Dark Ages, came a little bit later than Leo, and he was also a great teacher and very holy, but the thing that most people remember him for is his Gregorian chant, which is like the chanting that you hear at Mass, and he revamped the liturgy, specifically the music. And on to the evaluative long essay. So this is the one where you have to actually come up with a thesis and do some thinking yourself. So the question is, the late Middle Ages were a golden age of Christianity. Evaluate that statement. So you have to tell me whether you think it was a golden age or not a golden age. Notes number 5 will be very helpful here, because notes number 5 is called, what's it called? It's called the Golden Age. Yeah, there it is. It's called the Golden Age. And it goes through all this why it's called the Golden Age, and then some negatives why it wouldn't be called the Golden Age. So anyway, that will be very, very helpful for you. Look over notes 5. Okay, so you're going to reflect on how this time period has positively or negatively impacted modern Christianity, and your essay should state a clear thesis, yet reflect an understanding of opposing viewpoints. So you want to definitely pick a side, but also show that you kind of understand the other side, maybe shoot down some of the other side's arguments, not just make it, like one-sided propaganda. All right, so you're going to have a thesis, so you got to pick what you think about this. Do you really think that this was the golden age of the church? Is this something like we should go back to? Would it be awesome if the church was still like this? Or was it not really a golden age of the church? Was this not a sort of thing that we would want to go back to? So I've kind of summed up the PowerPoint here of why it would be the golden age or why it wouldn't be the golden age. And if you're going to say, yes, it was a golden age, then if that's going to be your thesis, then this is your evidence you can use. I'd pick at least 3. 3 is a minimum. And then if you're going to say, no, it wasn't the golden age, then I would pick at least 3 from here to talk about. At least 3, like a minimum of 3. You could do more. And then if you want to show the other side, you can pick a few from the other side to talk about as well. One piece of evidence that could go either way is developments in the sacraments. If you think infant baptism is a good thing, then maybe that's point for the twas side. If you don't think, then it could be if you don't think it's a good thing, then it could be one for the twasn't side. Same thing about private confession. If you think that's a good thing, then it can be evidence for that side. If you don't think it's a good thing, it could be evidence for the other side. So what made some people think it was a golden age is, well, one, there was the height of church power. The church has never had more political influence than at that time. And almost everyone in Europe was Christian, although there were Jews and Muslims. And there were very many religious devoted Christians during the time, and a lot of people felt like we were united as Christendom, like we were one big Christian land, even though there was a bunch of little kingdoms going on as well. There was still like a larger sense of Christendom. Many great spiritual devotions developed, like the Rosary, relics, going on pilgrimages, Eucharistic adoration, praying novenas, the Divine Office, also known as the Liturgy of the Hours, where priests and nuns and lots of other people pray, morning prayer, midday prayer, night prayer, evening prayer, etc. The Franciscans and Dominicans, the awesome new religious orders come out of this time. We get great theologians like Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure and some other guys that we probably don't care about. And also awesome architecture like the big cathedrals like the Cathedral of Notre Dame and so forth. So those are all reasons why it would be a golden age. Reasons why it wouldn't is because there was a lot of violence and not very good relations with other religions. There was the Crusades. There was lots of persecution of Jews and anti-Semitism. This is where the Inquisition, which kind of got out of control at some times. And some people really don't like the cozy relationship between church and state that was going on, where the Pope had a lot of political power. Specifically, the Avignon papacy was a time of great corruption, where the Pope was so much under the influence of the French king for 7 popes in a row. And then political discord and corruption, where we had 3 popes at one time during the Great Western Schism, the Great Eastern Schism, where the Catholic Church finally split with the Orthodox, and rivalries with the Byzantines and so forth. The pornocracy, that period in the 900s where we had terrible popes. And then also, a lot of people think that this time had a really legalistic spirituality. And what I mean by that is that they saw God as very far away and distant and like, oh, we're unworthy. And that God was kind of like Santa Claus. He's watching you from a distance, keeping track of what you did good and did bad. And it was very much kind of, the Christian life they thought was very much about like, you do good things and then God marks down your sins. And then you kind of count them up at the end of your life, and whichever column you got more in, that's, we're going to heaven or going to hell. They kind of saw life as a pass-fail, and they really, really, really wanted to make sure that they went to heaven. So it wasn't really about like the relationship with God and God's mercy and forgiveness and that sort of thing. They didn't focus on that much. In fact, if you ever read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, much of what he's mocking in the Pilgrims in those stories are people with this sort of legalistic spirituality. If you were going to organize it, this might be one way to organize it. You can organize it however you want, but this might be a good way. Write a short little introduction on, this period, the High Middle Ages, and then have your thesis about whether it was or whether it wasn't, or in some ways it was or in some ways it wasn't, or whatever it is that you're going to say. Then I would, you might put down the arguments for your thesis. So again, pick at least 3 from whichever side you're doing. And then after that, you could show the other side, maybe shoot down some of the other side's arguments if you can think of that. And then in your conclusion, say that despite the opposing points that you've pointed out, the thesis is still true. Okay. And that might be a good place to talk about how this time has positively or negatively impacted modern Christianity. You could do that here too. Actually, you could do that in any of these places. If you're shooting down the other side, you could say, oh, well, that's negatively impacted Christianity in the long run. So you can squeeze that in wherever, but the conclusion might be a place to fit that in if you can't figure it out. I would definitely outline your essay. You have the question, you have everything you need here. Develop your thesis, outline it, practice it. If you want to email it to me, I'll give you feedback. But don't walk into the test being like, I wonder what I'm going to write on my essay. You should know, so prepare yourself. I'm going to expect these to be good. All right? Good luck. Email me if you have issues. May the force be with you. Adios.